Welcome to Link Up and Learn with Live Big. I'm Sarah. In this episode, we're covering school avoidance, a challenge that touches many families and can no doubt feel very overwhelming at times. I'm pleased to be joined by two fantastic guests from Live Big. Amanda Trist, our area manager from New South Wales and an occupational therapist, and Melanie Gallagher, our area manager from Western Australia and a physiotherapist. Together, we will explore the issue of school avoidance, discuss its causes, and share strategies for families, teachers, and anyone supporting a child who is having difficulty attending school. Thank you both. Melanie, let's start with you. When we say school avoidance, what do we actually mean?
So it can look like a number of things, but we're not talking about truancy. So we're not talking about kids that go to school and then leave school or are supposed to be going and without their parents' knowledge just don't turn up. We are talking about children who are anxious and distressed about going to school and just really feel that they can't attend. So you might see things like meltdowns in the morning. There might be a lot of tears when trying to get up and get ready for school. They might have physical complaints, so they talk about stomach aches and not wanting to go. Might find it really hard to get the child out of bed, or perhaps you can get to school, but they just really don't want to get out of the car. Or perhaps you get to school, but you're sort of stuck outside the classroom and it's really hard to just get them to walk through the door into the classroom. And we often see lots of these sort of absences and this sort of avoidance, this I can't, this we can't, after weekends and holidays. We'll often see Sunday nights that kids are already starting to feel anxious and say that they just don't want to go to school the next morning. And it can be a real challenge for everybody.
Sounds distressing. Amanda, from your perspective, does that resonate with what you see in your work?
Yes, definitely. School avoidance is not a one-size-fits-all sort of conditional response from the child. And as Mel has been able to communicate, there are lots and lots of different factors that contribute to this, and it can manifest in so many different ways. And it really can catch our families off guard. It can present itself in so many different ways, in that a child could be okay at home, and it's only when presented with school attendance that the avoidance can be seen and escalates into to a point where that child is not receiving the education that they would really need. And that's the tricky part. It could be, you could get your child, as Mel was saying, to a point where you're at the school gate or you're outside the classroom door, and that's when it becomes so difficult to get them to be able to accept and move forward and to be able to attend and enter that classroom situation. And it can also escalate at any time during the day. It can be triggered by so many different things as well. So some parents also may be successful at walking through the gates. They might be successful in entering a classroom, but that phone call mid-morning, lunchtime occurs, and they need to go and pick their child up and reshuffle their day, reshuffle their commitments to be able to accommodate for the fact that their child is unable to continue to attend at school. And it has such a big, big impact on the children's learning, but also their social development, their physical development, their mental health, well-being, and just the overall picture of that child can be so affected by not having those opportunities to be able to thrive in that school environment. So yeah, that, what Mel has said is definitely what we can see with many of the families that we work with.
So why do you think school avoidance happens? What are the most common causes?
This is a very individualized response to problems that could be happening, with the child. And each child is so different, and each child's circumstances are so different, and their level of development is so different. So it's extremely individualized. But some of the more common reasons why a child may be avoiding attending school or being able to walk through those doors into a classroom could be around anxiety. So that anxiety could be social anxiety. Are they having difficulties socially communicating and adapting and being able to integrate socially into a classroom to their peers? Separation anxiety from their families, from what they feel familiar with. So they are challenged with a new environment and being unable to have the skills to cope with those changes and those challenges. That anxiety could also be related to a sensory overload. So schools are a very busy, bright, cognitively challenging spaces that a child who is struggling with that sensory regulation finds it very difficult to deal with. And often the environment has not been, don't have the accommodations that that child might need to deal with that sensory processing that they're finding so difficult with. It could be as simple as bullying. There could be children that they are unable to cope with in the playground because they are experiencing bullying, which is, something that our little kiddos often experience at school. Transitions, also hard for our children sometimes to process, and that could be transitions that are happening within the family unit. It could be transitions from, starting school into kindy for the very first time, transitioning into primary school, transitioning out of primary school into high school. So these transitions are big life stages in a child's life, and those transitions, often pose challenges to the child as well. I think the most common thing that people jump to the conclusion of is that school avoidance is a behavioural problem, and it often isn't. It's about a child's ability to be emotionally intelligent, being able to have the skills to communicate and socialise, but also have the difficulty with communication, cognitive challenges, but also it could be neurological in that it could be a sensory processing problem. Our little kiddos with neurodiversity find school spaces very challenging places to be.
Mel, do you see similar patterns, or are there any other factors to add?
Yeah, so we've had a bit of experience of this within my family, and some of the other things that you can see or that I have seen are things such as perfectionistic tendencies. So if you've got a child that's very aware of others in the class that are performing better than they are, or has a real internal drive to do everything very well and is putting a lot of pressure on themselves and not meeting their own expectations, that can create quite a lot of anxiety that will lead to school refusal as well. There might be some really negative self-talk going on. So I'm not good at anything. I can't do things as well as others in my class, or I'm not as good at sport as others. So if there's some of that self-talk happening, then you can also have a child that's just very anxious and not wanting to go to school because of that, and constantly comparing themselves to others in class. So there can be a range of different things that are happening for the child that means that for them, school does not feel like a safe environment. So I think it's really important to understand that it's important that we're not looking at it as a behavioural problem or a child who's being naughty or trying to be naughty or difficult. What's happening is that their brain is just perceiving that the school environment or the classroom is a really unsafe area for them. So you've got in the back part of your brain, you've got this part called the amygdala. And what the amygdala does is its job is to constantly scan the environment for any threats. And if it thinks that there's a threat, it gives you a very strong signal. So if school feels unsafe for whatever reason, the amygdala starts to kick off, and it gives you a warning signal in the form of anxiety that will make the child feel very, very anxious. because their brain is saying to them, don't go to school, school is unsafe and you shouldn't go. And so they're naturally going to respond to that by not wanting to go. So what we really need to do to support them is to really try and understand what the actual issues are for them. Why does school feel so unsafe? And what can we do about those individual issues so that they start to feel safer when they're at school?
Amanda, what happens if school avoidance isn't addressed early?
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for that. That's a great question. I think it's fairly obvious that if we don't address this problem early, it's going to lead to greater problems and challenges for the kiddos as they continue to grow. So without going to school, they're going to miss out those learning and academic opportunities and, fall behind in their academic learning, which is going to have all sorts of implications for the opportunities that they might be available to them as they grow. They're not going to have the opportunity to build the skills that they need, to move on through their academic journeys. There's also going to be an impact on their ability to socialise and to be, a social human being and being able to integrate into the greater society as they grow. This age is really important to build those social skills. They're learning, what it means to socially communicate, interact, become emotionally intelligent. So it's a key age to get all of those skills and embed those into what they need to do in their everyday lives moving forward. The school age is where you learn to navigate relationships, to solve problems, to learn what it means to be part of a community or to be part of a group. It's where kiddos learn, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's an expected behaviour or an unexpected behaviour. And that's going to have a knock-on effect also, for our children's mental health development. So if these kids are feeling isolated and anxious, there's always going to be a knock-on effect with mental health concerns. Anxieties can deepen and really grow into some more challenging health concerns, mental health concerns, such as depression, and all of the risks that are associated with that. So, and it can become a vicious cycle. Once a child starts avoiding school, anxiety can increase. That increased anxiety is going to make going to school harder. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And it has a knock-on effect in the family. So parents often feel guilty, they feel frustrated, they feel isolated, they feel lost and unable to try and find those solutions. No parent wants to see their child struggle. No parent wants to see their child, being unable to thrive, which is going to have a massive knock-on effect into that family unit as well. And it can be just exhausting and emotionally draining for everybody involved. So catching it early and trying to identify what the underlying problem could be and then implementing solutions to help fix that is really, really important.
Mel, what do you see in terms of the impact on families and schools?
Look, it's just really hard for everyone. Obviously, the child themselves is going through a really difficult time. As the parent or the carer, it's incredibly distressing to see your child go through a hard time. The tears in the morning, etc., are really hard to deal with, can create a huge amount of stress at home, particularly in the mornings when you're trying to get kids off to school, but also worry for the parent around where this is going to lead to. Is the child becoming further and further behind at school? It's obviously difficult for the schools as well. There's a certain level of disruption. It can be really hard when there is a disconnect between school and the carers. And so it's really important that those lines of communication are kept open and that the child's not being labelled as a naughty child, but rather it's understood that they're having some real difficulties that they need support with. And parents can often feel quite judged as well. I think most of us as parents are constantly feeling like we're not doing as good a job as we would like to. And if you've got a child who's not going to school and you don't feel that you're able to support them in the way that they need, you can feel, really bad about that and feel like you're being judged. So parents need a lot of support as well as the child do.
Amanda, if a parent is listening right now and feeling overwhelmed, what's the first thing they can do?
I think it's really important that parents understand and appreciate that those feelings of guilt that Melanie was just talking about, normal for any parent, when you're looking at your child distressed, but it's really important to stay calm and to validate the child's feelings and to allow that child to be able to have that space, that safe space to let mum and dad know what's happening for them. So things like, I can see that school's going to be getting to school today is really hard for you. Can you tell me about that? Can we work through this together? What can we do to make you feel better at this time, in this moment? But to make sure that you're communicating in a way that's really calm and it's creating a safe space for that child to be able to let you know what's happening to them at that moment. Once we escalate to behaviours of, not in behaviours, but overstimulation or meltdowns, it's really hard to get back to that calm place. So by starting off on a calm, even footing is going to be helpful. So another strategy is also going to be making sure that we are talking to the school and communicating with the school and using the school as a team approach. It's not just the parent's responsibility and it's not just the school's responsibility. It's a team effort because the strategies that you come up with need to be consistent and they need to carry over from home to school and back again. So if it is because we have sensory processing problems, the parent and the school could work together to create a safe space on arrival, a more flexible start time so that child is not arriving in the hustle and bustle of that 9 o'clock bell when everybody's running, around the school playground and into their rooms. They could set up buddy systems where that child might have a little buddy at school, which, offers them some support and some social interactions, helping them feel safe. That can make a huge difference. Making sure that environment has been set up. So that's a great way that parents and schools could work together to see if they could set up a safe place within a classroom for that child. Having predictable routines is really important. So sometimes children have difficulties coping with change and unexpected change. So if we have very predictable routines so that they know what is happening next, then they know what they're going to expect and they know that what's expected of them. So that change is not going to be quite as intimidating and triggering those anxious responses. And those routines can also, if we make them visual, that's a great way for children to be able to follow through with them. And if you make those routines visual, but also adaptable and give the child control over what those routines might look like, that helps that child to also feel safe because I'm now able to have some input into how I want my routine to look, what it's going to do during a day. And it gives them some sense of control back to the child as well. Occupational therapists often use what we call an emotional regulation toolkit, and they might be strategies that are very specific and individualized. So an emotional regulation toolkit is going to be individualized, and it's going to help that kiddo manage their sensory overload or their sensory regulation. And that could be simply like a weighted lap pad, a weighted teddy bear, having some movement breaks, having a space that they could retreat to do some breathing exercises in, allowing them to sit on a wiggle chair in the classroom or have a little elastic band around their chair that they can bang their legs against because they need to seek that movement to be able to learn. So there's lots of different things that a therapist could come in and help give some recommendations and try some different things to help them regulate their emotions. And I guess the other thing that a parent might want to do is explore, do we have some circumstances within that classroom where that child might feel unsafe? Is it because that they're having a hard time dealing with another child? Are they having a hard time dealing with or developing a relationship with a particular teacher? But, is there a reason why that child is feeling unsafe in that classroom? So I guess, very simply, there might be some ideas that we could give a parent, but obviously the list is kind of never ending and that list needs to be individualised to the child.
So, Mel, do you have anything to add for the parents out there listening?
Yeah, look, I think the main thing is that there is support out there. It can take a while to figure things out, but there are lots of places and people that you can go to for support. I think the first really important thing is to be like an investigator and try and figure out what the causes are and what's going on. So having a chat with your child first, make it really non-threatening, really calm, really open, just have that sort of interested scientist kind of cap on. We know kids often don't like having discussions about difficult things, so you might need to do it when you're not sort of facing each other. You're not eye to eye, but sort of side by side. We have a lot of conversations in the car or in the park whilst we're walking the dog. Might be while you're playing a game of Uno or out the front shooting hoops or something like that. But just having that really open conversation and inviting them to really let you know what's going on. And then I think the next thing that's really important is to have a chat with the teachers at school. Just find out what's going on in the classroom. How do things look in the playground? Again, it's just about gathering more information around what the causes might be. And then most parents or carers will have a pretty strong gut feel about where they think the issues are. So is it to do with handwriting? Do we need OT intervention? Or is there some really negative self-talk? Do we maybe need some psych intervention? Or is there some bullying going on and we need to have really in-depth discussions with the school? Once you've got a bit of an idea of what you think might be happening, one other really good person to go to might be your GP, where you can talk about what's going on and what your gut feel is, and then explore some options as far as referrals to a paediatrician if you think there might be, say, an ADHD diagnosis there that needs exploring, or whether it's referral for OT or physio if there's, physical problems with sport, etc., or whether it might be psychology to have a look at some of those sort of negative self-talks, etc. So that can be a really good starting place, along with those really strong conversations with the school. And if you do get a specialist or an allied health professional on board, again, just making sure that everyone's communicating with each other and that you're all on the same page. And obviously got to include the child in what the plans are and make sure that they're happy with everything as well.
Amanda, you also mentioned it's important to inform the teachers at school. What can teachers do to support these students?
I think the teacher's role is so important when we're supporting kiddos who really do have and are experiencing school avoidance. And look, our hats are off to those teachers. They do such a marvellously wonderful job, but it's great to consider and put in some strategies as to why these kids might be avoiding school. I think one, Mel's touched on it several times, creating safe spaces, welcoming spaces where that child feels like they are included, that they have a voice, that they feel safe is really important. I remember watching on a YouTube clip, some teachers have the most amazing warm welcome routine where they line the kids up at the door to their classroom, and everyone gets to choose a greeting. It could be a high five, it could be a hug, it could be a little dance, whatever it is, but to create that warm welcome into a classroom. So walking through those doors is a fun and exciting experience and not something that a child might dread, and being inclusive with the whole class. Being able to say, hey, it's really great to see you, coming with that positive, warm, welcoming attitude. I think it's great. And then making sure that there are safe spaces within classrooms for regulation, being identifying early when that regulation needs to happen. I think that's a real skill. I think I touched on it before. When a child is experiencing sensory processing difficulties and they're getting to that edge where they're unable to process, and it flips into what we call, you flip your lid. Mel touched on it, when our thinking brain gets turned off and our emotional brain gets turned on, a child loses the ability to think rationally. And if you can work that out, you can identify it before that happens and offer some regulation strategies, you're going to hopefully, or you may have a better opportunity of preventing a meltdown from happening, and give that child an opportunity to calm down and then rejoin the classroom later. Being able to be flexible is going to be a key thing for teachers. And I know they have to stick to a routine and a schedule, but also being able to say, okay, I can see that this child is on the verge of not coping. Let's be flexible and give them the opportunity to have a timeout, a walk around the classroom. They might give them a task to do. Can you take this up to the principal or to the front office so that they can, or take the lunch orders up to the canteen so that child has an opportunity to, have a space where they can calm down and come back to the classroom when they're ready. Small adjustments within the day of a classroom can be really, really important. So, I know of a child who really struggled with group work, and whenever the class was asked to join up into small groups to do some work, that was absolutely triggering and terrifying for that child, and that's when those avoidant behaviours really kicked in. But being able to sort of be flexible enough to create an area where that child was able to do some side-by-side learning, and then when they were ready to join the group, because they could see that was safe, they could see that they were able to integrate it at their own pace, that made the world of difference to that child. And teachers need to, and I'm sure they do, but teachers need to be able to work as a team with that child's family and then the child's therapist that might be involved with them. Because if you're all on the same page and you're all implementing the same strategies and you're all evaluating those strategies to see if they're being effective, and then you're all collaborating to see what the most effective strategies are, then you're going to provide opportunities for success for that child. So it's about creating an environment, school environment that feels safe, that feels predictable, that feels supporting, and teachers who can lead with empathy and flexibility, I think, is a huge part of the solution.
Mel, how can teachers and parents work together effectively?
Yeah, very much as Amanda mentioned, just that real sense of working together as a team, communicating, sharing information with each other. So I guess as a parent, we expect a lot from teachers and they have a really difficult job. So making sure that we're not just going with extra load for them, but talking about what we're doing as well, who we've seen. For example, went to see the OT. We've got some really good strategies around writing, letting the teacher know that you're keen to work with them, but also making sure that you're sharing wins with each other as well and not just the challenges. So that might look like saying, thanks for moving my daughter to the front of the classroom. She's mentioned that now she's not comparing herself to everybody else because she's not looking around at everyone else. That's made a big difference. Thank you so much for being flexible. Just really having that approach that you're both working together for the best outcome for the child, really.
Amanda, at what point should parents seek professional help?
Yeah, we've already talked about that, early intervention is important because the longer that school avoidance goes on for, the harder it's going to be to break that cycle. And, anxiety is something that if it's not actually managed well early, just snowballs to a point where it becomes out of control. And it has all sorts of implications for that child's, mental health and well-being. So getting in early is important. So I wouldn't be sitting back and just, waiting and seeing, but I'd be starting to have conversations early on. Mel touched on it definitely with your GP, getting the professional assessments that might be needed to see, what is the underlying cause? Is there a diagnosis that needs to be sought so that you've got an opportunity to know what's going on for that child and then putting some strategies in place to do that? Talking to your GP, pediatrician, really, really important. And then they'll be able to advise, what other therapy or professionals may benefit your child, whether that be occupational therapy, speech pathology, physiotherapy, psychology, to help talk through some of those cognitive difficulties, being able to adapt to change. How do we counteract all of that negative self-talk? So it's important to get in early, and it's important to seek professional assessments and professional interventions early. And it's important to start those conversations with your school and the classroom teacher early as well. Once they escalate, it's really difficult to rein it in and, find the solutions that child needs to be able to develop in the way that we would love our children to.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Amanda and Mel, for joining us and sharing your expertise on understanding and managing school avoidance. If you'd like to connect with us and learn more about Live Big, visit livebig.com.au and don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. We acknowledge the traditional owners of this nation, whose country we work and live in. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as traditional custodians and their ongoing connections to land and sea. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging as law keepers of the world's oldest living culture. We celebrate the stories, culture and traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders so we can, in the true spirit of reconciliation, continue the journey together.